Welcome. Thank you for joining me for this webinar. I apologize for the long title this time, but we are here to discuss Finding Focus, National Institutes of Health Area Award, which stands for Academic Research Enhancement Award, and the National Science Foundation RUI, which is abbreviation for Research in Undergraduate Institutions. My name is Gina Polito-Jan, and I'm the Manager of Research Development at WISIS. I'm glad you've taken the time to join me this afternoon. This is actually the last webinar in our grant writing webinar series for the current academic year. But don't worry, all of the webinars that I've done this year are recorded and are available on demand on the WISIS website, and I'll give you that kind of full list of what we have available at the end. And then next year, of course, we're planning to do a whole new group of webinars as well. I've got my email address here on the front page. So if you have ideas for other things you'd like to see in webinar form next year, please reach out and let me know. I'm really happy to get that kind of information so that I can be planning webinars that are useful to the group of you out there. If you have questions during today's presentation, please use the Q&A function, and I'll try to address questions as I go. If I don't get to them in the middle, hopefully there'll be time at the end for me to answer them then. Yeah, and as I said, my email address is here. So if you have any questions after we're done, any other remaining questions that we didn't get to, please email me. Okay, so this is kind of the basic agenda of things I'm going to cover. The idea of this webinar today was to talk about two grant programs that are really designed very well or fit very well with predominantly undergraduate institutions. So that's a term that you'll hear thrown around a lot in the grant world. We call them PUIs. So PUI means predominantly undergraduate institution, which means that these grant programs are very well suited to the 11 UW comprehensive campuses. We're talking about two programs under two different federal agencies. So the area or R15 program falls under the National Institutes of Health, and then the RUI program or Research for Undergraduate Institutions program falls under the National Science Foundation. So each of those agencies has a different way of defining, what they define as a PUI. But I believe all the comprehensives should fall under both of those definitions. I'll give you those definitions today so that you can determine whether you are eligible for one or both of these programs. So we'll talk briefly about the NIH and then the specific program, the R15 within the NIH, and then we'll talk a little bit about NSF and then their RUI program. Okay, so starting with the National Institutes of Health. I'm sure you've heard of the NIH, especially recently with COVID, we've been hearing a lot about the NIH. NIH stands for National Institutes of Health, and that is a plural word because there are 27 separate institutes and centers within the NIH. It's not just one, it's actually 7 different institutes and centers. And I've listed, I don't know if this is the full list of all of them, but this is many of them that fall within that group. So there's a National Institute on Drug Abuse, there's a National Cancer Institute, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, the National Human Genome Research Institute, and most of these, I think all of these on this page do offer some kind of funding. So the NIH kind of organizes their funding, and they have these sort of large grant programs, and then you apply to be funded by one of these institutes. And you can indicate on your application which institute you think is best suited to your project. If you don't do that, then NIH will decide kind of which one they're going to send it to. So your proposal gets sent to one of these institutes, and then they actually have a standing review panel that will review it. So the NIH is the primary federal agency for conducting and supporting medical research. If you look at this list of institutes, they all have something to do with human health. So that's really the main purview of the National Institutes of Health. Okay, so this is a list of the major NIH funding programs. Probably best known are their research grants, and they have this sort of category system that they used. So their R grants are their research grants. And there's a few different types of R grants. The R01 is the largest research grant program. This is sort of their flagship. It's the largest one. These are large grants. They can last, I believe, up to 5 years. There's really no budget limit. So the R01 is really the very large grant program that you might be working your way up to. It's not usually the one that you start with. They also have the R03 grant program, which is their small grant program. And so you can be funded for up to 2 years at $50,000 a year. The R21 is their exploratory or developmental research program, which provides support for early and conceptual stages of project development. But what we want to focus on mainly today is this R15 or Area Award. Because an area stands for Academic Research Enhancement Award, because it's specifically for undergraduate institutions. So, you know, any PUI, you know, no matter what institution you are located at now, you're eligible to apply to any of these programs. But your chances might not be so great going up against the large universities for an R01. The R15 does not allow large institutions like UW-Madison to apply for the R15. So your competition is going to be with institutions more your size for that program. The NIH also has some training and career development programs, their training grants, fellowship grants, and career development awards. They also have small business programs. They have SBIRs. They have conference grants, program center grants, resource grants, etc. But they're, like I said, they're best known are their research grants. And then today we want to focus on this R15 program. So let me give you some details about that. The Research Enhancement Award, or the R15, was established. Its purpose is to support small-scale research projects at educational institutions that they know provide degrees for a significant number of the nation's research scientists, but have not yet been major recipients of NIH support. So it was created to kind of fill that gap. We know that there's a lot of research happening at these smaller institutions. They haven't been able to compete for those large R01 awards. So what can we do to help that? The goals of the R15 are to support research at undergraduate-focused institutions and to expose students to research and encourage them to pursue research careers. And also to strengthen the research environment of the institution. I think more and more federal agencies are realizing that there are, limited resources at these smaller institutions, and they're really hoping that these grants can enhance that, to boost the research environment, help you buy more research equipment, and have access to other resources that can help grow the research program at your university. There are actually 2 programs under the R15, the area and the REAP. And so I think for all of us here today, it's the area that's going to apply to you. It's the Academic Research Enhancement Award for undergraduate focused institutions. The REAP program is the Research Enhancement Program for health professional schools and graduate schools. So this is for, medical schools, schools of dentistry, et cetera, but they also need to be smaller. They need to be institutions that do not have significant NIH funding yet. So again, even though because Madison does have, School of Veterinary Medicine and School of Medicine, I think those programs are both too large to qualify for the REAP. Okay, so let's look at institutional eligibility. So what does NIH consider a PUI? What's a predominantly undergraduate institution in the eyes of the National Institutes of Health? Well, for NIH, it's based on how much grant money you've received from NIH in the last couple of years. So first of all, the applicant institution must be an accredited public or nonprofit private school that grants baccalaureate degrees in biomedical sciences. So with NIH, we're still talking about health research, medical research in that way. So biomedical sciences could include things like biology, chemistry. I've known mathematicians to go after NIH, statisticians, sociology. If it has a human health related subject matter, then it would fit. So all non-health professional components of the institution together have received less than $6 million in funding from the NIH in the last 4 of the last 7 years. So it's a little complicated, but basically that means that you cannot have received more than $6 million in NIH funding in the last few years. If that's the case, I'm sure Madison has, and probably Milwaukee too, have both received more than $6 million from NIH. They would not qualify for the R15 program. A university with a separate medical school or other health professional school could be eligible, even if they're part of a larger university that has, as long as they can show that they're a separate institution. You are required to submit a letter from the provost varying the eligibility of the applicant institution. And you can include a subaward to a non-eligible institution. So what that means is, if you are a smaller institution, let's just say you're at UW Oshkosh, for example, you could apply for the R15 as the lead institution, and that proposal may include a subaward to UW-Madison or some other larger university that doesn't qualify for the R15 on its own. The previous institution I used to work at, we did qualify for the R15, and we used to do this all the time. So that's one way. Another way to collaborate and still be eligible for this program. So that's institutional eligibility. In order to be the PI on one of these proposals, you must have a primary appointment at the R15 eligible institution. You need to have an ERA Commons account. That's not too hard to do, but make sure you do it a month at least ahead of time of your proposal, because it can take a little time for it to be approved. Contact your sponsor programs office. They can help you get set up in the ERA Commons. To be the lead PI on an R15 award, you may not be the PI of an active NIH research grant at the time of the award. So that means if you already hold an NIH R01 or an R03 or an R21 or any of those other R grants, if you already have one of those awards, then you cannot be the lead PI on an R15 award. You cannot accept it. Now, let me say this. If you hold a research award, you can apply for the R15. And so if that one begins after your other one ends, then you're okay. They just can't overlap. So the application can still happen, but if you are to accept the awards, you cannot already hold another NIHR award. You can be key personnel for another NIH grant, you just can't be the lead PI. Of course, you can't hold more than one R15 grant at the same time. If one runs out, you can apply for another. This eligibility applies only to the PI and in the case of multiple PIs. So any other collaborators, consultants, or sub-awardees do not have to have these limited eligibility. So your sub-awardee lead PI can hold another R grant, that's okay. So what do these proposals look like? These are kind of the basic parameters. The R15 has a project period of up to 3 years, and you can request up to $300 in direct costs or $100,000 per year. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but it should add up to $300,000 max over the 3 years. Now, keep in mind that with NIH awards, you can and should request indirect costs, and the indirect costs will be above that $300,000. So you get $300,000 to spend on all of your direct costs, and then you just add your indirect costs, whatever according to your institution's rates on top of that. So if you have a 50% independent cost rate, you'd actually get $450,000 from an NIH. There are standard due dates. So this is another thing that NIH does. They have rotating standard due dates. So there's actually 3 different opportunities each year to submit an R15 proposal. They're due on February 25th, June 25th, and October 25th of each year. So if you're not quite ready to submit by June 25th, you can apply to the next window, which is in October, and so on. So there are some additional, besides all the kind of standard documents that you need to submit with an NIH proposal, there are some extra things that you need to do when you're applying for an R15. So as I mentioned, these awards are really designed to enhance the research environment at these smaller institutions. And so they want you to show that there's a need for that. And then they want you to show how this award is going to accomplish that. So within the facilities and other resources section of the proposal, there are a few additional requirements. They want you to provide a profile of students at the institution and an estimate of the number who've received a BA or BS degree and gone on to obtain an advanced degree in a health-related field. They want you to show a plan to recruit undergraduate students from diverse backgrounds. They want you to talk about the special characteristics of the institution that make it appropriate for an area award and the impact of the area grant on the PI and on the research environment and on the students. So some of this is data that your institution probably collects. If your institution has ever applied for an R15 before, this is something, there may be some templates or information available in your sponsored programs office. So check with them, see if they have some of this information available, and check with your, administration on your campus to gather some of this information. So in addition to that, I mentioned the provost letter. This certifies that the academic component has more undergraduates than graduate students. So you have to show that your institution has more undergrads than graduate students. And that all the non-health professional components of the institution together have received no more than $6 million per year in 4 of the last 7 years from NIH. So that's what I talked about before, that sort of award limit. The letter also has to validate that the PI has a primary appointment at the institution. This, again, if your institution has ever applied for an R15 before, this is a letter that Sponsored Programs probably already has. Speaking from experience, we had a template letter in our office that we just had ready to go anytime anyone was going to submit for this. So if it's the first time, you know, your Sponsored Programs office, I'm sure, can help put this together, get the provost signature on it, and then you'll have it. It just probably needs to be updated every year. And then you can have it on hand to use for any time someone wants to submit an R15. So how are grant applications reviewed at the National Institutes of Health? Well, they have what they call study sections. They have these sort of standing groups of reviewers. Within the NIH, there is a Center for Scientific Review. And you can go to their website to find a study section that might be most appropriate for your proposal. So when you submit a proposal, there's an optional form called the assignment request form. You can fill this out and indicate which study section you think it would be best to review your proposal. I recommend doing this, taking the time to find out which study section is most appropriate. If you skip it, they'll guess for you, but you would probably have a better idea of which sort of main topic area your proposal should go to. So I recommend indicating it. They don't have to do what you say, but if you list some things, then hopefully that will be where it ends up getting reviewed. So you can choose up to 3 institutes or centers to assign your application, and then you can actually choose 3 that you don't want it to go to. Yeah, you can also list individuals who should review your application and those who should not, and why. You can list scientific areas of expertise, up to 5 things, and that will just help them, again, narrow it down to which who should be reviewing it. Let's see. So there are 5 review criteria that the NIH uses to review your proposal. Significance, investigator, innovation, approach, and environment. You'll receive a numeric score ranging from 10 to 90, where 10 is actually best. So when NIH scores your proposal, you actually want a lower score. Lower scores are better. Generally, scores of about 10 to 30 are most likely to be funded. That's not a hard and fast rule. There are some that score under 30 that are not funded, and there are some that score over 30 that are. But that's about the range that you want to be in. All right, any questions about NIH before I switch to NSF? Nice. I see a hand raised, but I'm not sure I see a question. All right, if we can get a question typed in there, then I can try and answer it in a little bit. Okay, sorry about that. Oh goodness, I'm going the wrong way. Here we go. All right, let's move on to the National Science Foundation. The NSF was created by an Act of Congress in 1950 to support all fields of fundamental science and engineering. So this is more of a fundamental science agency. It is smaller. They have a smaller budget than the NIH. Their budget did get a boost in the last year, up to $8.8 billion. Of all the federal research, they fund about 25% of basic science research, and their success rate is around 26% of proposals get awarded. Their mission, as established in 1950, was to promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense. NSF is organized into 7 different directorates. This recently changed. They added a new one. I think it's only been a year or so since it was added. So 7 directorates. NSF is organized into these main categories, which are biological sciences, computer and information science, engineering, geosciences, math and physical sciences, social, behavior, and economic sciences, STEM education, and the newest directorate is technology, innovation, and partnerships. And as I said, I think this one's only existed for the last year. And they added this directorate last year. I think this is the first new directorate in like 20 or more years. So the program I want to, within these directorates, there are divisions. So for example, within math and physical sciences, there are divisions like chemistry, mathematical sciences, physics, and so on. So we're going to talk about a program called Research in Undergraduate Institutions. The solicitation that describes that program actually describes two programs. So it talks about the RUI and then also Research Opportunity Awards, which are the ROA. So RUI proposals support PUI faculty in research that engages them in their professional fields, builds capacity for research at their home institution, and supports the integration of research in undergraduate education. So again, we're looking at building that research capacity at these smaller institutions. The ROAs similarly support PUI faculty research, but these awards typically allow faculty to work as visiting scientists at research-intensive organizations where they collaborate with other NSF-supported investigators. So it's another really cool program. If you're interested, I encourage you to do some more research on it. You can reach out to me. But for today's purposes, we're going to focus on that RUI portion. So how does NSF determine this PUI eligibility? Well, rather than the amount of the awards, NSF looks at the degrees that your institution has awarded. So eligible PUIs under this program are accredited colleges that award associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and/or master's degrees in NSF-supported fields, but have awarded 20 or fewer PhD or similar level degrees in all these NSF-supported fields during the combined previous 2 academic years. So you can have graduate students and you can award a few PhDs, just not very many. That's how they determine this PUI status. So community colleges would actually fall under this, definition. So this is one solicitation that can be submitted to any of those directorates that we just looked at. So all NSF directorates support these RUI and ROA funding activities. The funding for these awards is contained within research and education program allocations and not held as a separate allocation. What that means is NSF does not have a separate budget just for RUIs and ROAs. You would submit your application if you are, for example, in biological sciences, you'd submit a specific RUI application to the Division of Biological Sciences. That division has a set budget, and they award, all of their awards through their budget. So they're going to give out some standard research awards, some RUIs, but they all come out of that biological sciences budget. These proposals are evaluated and funded by the NSF programs in their disciplinary areas of the proposed research, and they're funded at their discretion. So they don't necessarily have to award, they don't have a limit or a certain number of RUIs that they have to award. It's just kind of based on the merits of each of these proposals. Now, I will say this, NSF has been known to sometimes combine funding across disciplines. So, for example, if biological sciences, finds 50 proposals that they really think are worthy of being funded, but they're hitting that budget limit, they can actually reach out to another division and say, hey, I've got this great proposal. Would you like to jointly support it? So, they get some really great proposals. That does happen. If you're curious as to which of these divisions your proposal would fit into and whether or not your RUI program would be appropriate, it's always a great idea to contact the program officers. So again, if you're looking at submitting to, let's say you're looking at submitting to chemistry, reach out to a program officer in chemistry and ask them, discuss with them, send them a one-page summary of your project, and ask them if they think that this would be a good candidate for an RUI proposal. Before you spend all that time writing the full proposal, it's always a great idea to reach out to the program officers first, to determine if should I send it as a research award or as an RUI. Just a few more kind of bullet points about these programs. Again, there's so they're subject to individual program deadlines. So what that means is when you look at the RUI solicitation, you're not going to see any deadlines on it. The deadline is, they vary across the different divisions. And so you are submitting based on that division's deadline. So say you're submitting to a chemistry, there's a chemistry synthesis program. So let's say your proposal fits within chemistry synthesis. Chemistry synthesis has its own deadline. I believe it's somewhere around September 15th. So your RUI proposal would be due to chemistry synthesis by September 15th. Okay, but if you're submitting an RUI proposal to biological sciences, they don't have deadlines at all. So you could submit it at any time, which sounds great, but however, these no deadline ones can be kind of tricky because it's too easy to postpone your work. So set your own deadline and make sure you get it in by that date. So hopefully that makes sense. You're going to go by the deadline of the program that you're submitting to. So you need to really decide and establish what the best program is and then go by those deadlines. These programs can be individual, or you could do a collaborative research project. And you could involve faculty and students at your own or other institutions. So the students involved could be at your institution and others. It could be a request involving shared research instrumentation. So you may be going to another location or, jointly purchasing some instrumentation. And then the other important requirement of this program is called the impact statement. So let's look at the details of that. The impact statement. It's 5 pages or less. So you need to write this 5-page document. It can be less, but it can be no more than 5 pages. And this is where you really get into the meat of, what about your program really fits this specialized case. So in the impact statement, you're going to talk about the impact of the proposed project on the research environment of the PUI. Again, we're looking to enhance the research environment at your institution. How is that going to happen? You want to talk about the impact on the careers of the faculty participants. How is this going to enhance your career and any other collaborators at your institution? Address the ability of the involved departments to better prepare students for entry into advanced degree programs and/or careers in science and engineering. So we're looking at encouraging students to pursue science. You can show this by talking about direct student research training that will be happening within your project. And if you get this award, that's going to increase the involvement of the faculty in competitive research as well. So again, both of these programs are really trying to help you grow your research at your institution. You can parlay these smaller awards into larger awards in the future. You also want to talk about the record of the department and the institution in educating undergraduates for science and engineering careers. So go back in the last few years and what has that looked like in your institution? But there's more. Also talk about your plans to attract qualified undergraduate students to the project, including the criteria for their selection and any provisions that will increase the participation of groups underrepresented in science and engineering. That's an important piece, of course. Talk about your plans for measuring the effect of project participation on the participating students during and after their undergraduate years. Any anticipated contribution of any new research tools, any instrumentation or databases that you'll be able to have access to with this grant. What's the contribution to both the education and research opportunities for students and faculty? And then finally, include information on factors affecting research productivity, such as teaching loads, availability or lack of support personnel. So here, I think this is a great opportunity for those of you at the comprehensives to really establish need for this award. Many of you have relatively high teaching loads. And so if you can talk about that here and really establish a need for this type of award, this would really help, enhance the research at your institution. If I receive this award and I can get a course buyout, and devote more time to research, that's going to really help elevate research at our institution. So, besides teaching loads, you can talk about your availability or lack of support personnel, the nature of your experimental and computational facilities, and features of the student population. Anything that within the student population that makes you unique and establishes, again, a need for this grant. You can also describe any institutional support for research activity by faculty and students and the impact of that support on the proposed project. Okay, so I can't talk about NSF without also talking about broader impacts. This is very important to NSF. It's a large part of how your proposal will be evaluated. NSF is very dedicated to the idea that your research is not just contained research within your university, but that it really impacts and improves society as a whole in some way. So these are examples of broader impacts that might apply to your project. Broader impacts include things like teaching, training, and learning for undergraduates or graduate students, broadening the participation of underrepresented groups, building or enhancing partnerships, with other agencies or internationally, a broader dissemination to enhance scientific and technological understanding, enhancing infrastructure, like your labs, your equipment, working in developing countries, for example. And you could also include local impacts, policies at the state and local level. So this is a pretty broad range of broader impacts. And I would recommend, don't try to do all of them. It would actually be a better plan to focus on one or two. It's better to do one or two of these very, very well than try to hit everything on the list. The broader impacts should be integrated into your project description. As you're writing your narrative, think about this broader impacts from the very beginning of your writing process. Very often, I've seen PIs kind of remember at the last minute, oh gosh, I need broader impacts. And so they just add a paragraph or two at the end of their narrative. This is not a good practice because reviewers will notice that they can tell if it's a last minute effort. So make sure that it's really woven into your narrative and is a part of your thought process from the very beginning. Keep in mind also that if there are costs involved to these broader impacts, you can include those costs in your budget. So your budget can include things that you need for this project to enhance the broader impacts. All right, so speaking of broader impacts, NSF has two main review criteria. intellectual merit and broader impacts. So your entire proposal will be reviewed on these two major review criteria. Intellectual merit includes the potential for advancing knowledge within your field or across fields, the qualification of the investigators, the project creativity and originality, the organization of the ideas and experiments. So again, this is where you want to show that you've really put some thought into this. It's not just thrown together. You have a timeline, you have a step-by-step process, and you know how that's going to fit together. They'll look at your access to resources, the resources that are necessary for this project, and are they available? And is it potentially transformative research? Under broader impacts, they're looking at promoting teaching, training, and education, at enhancement of infrastructure for research and education, community resources and outreach, participation of underrepresented groups, and an overall benefit to society. Speaking of reviewing, I always like to plug becoming a reviewer yourself. You do not have to be an awardee to be a reviewer. So to review for NIH, you do not have to have already received an NIH award or NSF or any of these other agencies. Private foundations are looking for reviewers. Everybody's looking for reviewers. It's a great idea. It does take time, a good chunk of time, but it's a great idea to get involved with reviewing proposals because it will make your proposals that you write so much better. Lots of benefits to becoming a reviewer, including seeing the review process in action. What does it really look like? What's it going to be like when my proposal gets here? So you'll gain perspective for writing your own proposal. You'll also have a chance to network with colleagues in your area. Get to know them, find out where they're being funded, what kind of work they're working on. And just the idea of contributing to advancing your field is a nice idea too. Okay, and as I mentioned, WISES does about 10 webinars a year, and this is pretty complete. I don't know if this is 100% complete, but this is most of the titles that we have available on our website right now. This year recently, I did a session on budgeting and budget justifications. We had a great session last year on collaborative grant seeking. That's still available on demand. Tools for grant seeking is going to talk about tools that the UW system provides for you. So Pivot and Grant Resource Center are two of the resources that you can use to look up grant funding opportunities. This one is, this particular webinar is on a very specific grant program. There's some others like that. There's a webinar on the NSF MRI program, which is specifically for obtaining research instrumentation, and so on. So these are all available on our website. I hope you'll check it out. And then finally, I wanted to mention our Spark Symposium. The WISES Spark Symposium is coming up this August. It will be at UW Oshkosh this year. Last year, we had a great in-person event. It had been a couple years since we were able to do it in person, but we held this event last year at La Crosse. It was a great experience, and we know that Oshkosh is going to be just as exciting. So this is an opportunity for faculty to come and learn about each other's research. We encourage you to bring students, and students can present their posters and network with other students and other faculty. So it's a great opportunity for them to kind of see what's going on in research and other scholarly projects. We encourage posters and research talks from individuals beyond just traditional science. Certainly social sciences and humanities are welcome as well. So that's the information I have for you today.